Good afternoon and welcome to God's Answers to Your Questions of the Wednesday afternoon edition. If you are coming in on Facebook, submit your question to us there. If you are, there's a couple different ways you can come in. We're streaming to God's Answers to Your Questions. You can submit questions there. Or my page. You can submit questions in Christian Edification Ministries. And if you're on a YouTube channel, we welcome your questions or comments as we go through. We really want to hear your input this afternoon. So let me bring in our panelist. Joining me today is Simon Harris. How you doing, Simon?
Hey, CJ. Good to see you. I'm doing good. Good to be with you. Oh, you muted yourself.
Oh, I did?
Yeah. I could see your mouth moving, but I couldn't hear you talking.
Can you hear me now?
I sure can.
That was weird.
Yes.
We're missing Curtis today.
Something must be up with your mic because you're mute again.
Really?
Yeah.
Take it away.
So I heard you say we're missing Curtis today. We are. He has some family things going on, and so we're missing him today. But I'm going to do our best to take us through chapter 9. So kind of if you think about what's been going on in the last couple of chapters, in chapters 7 and 8, Solomon has been giving us practical advice for living life under the sun. Really, the whole point in this book is for us to learn what he learned, and that is, what is the best way for us to live. And so we're going to have to live in this vain world for the time that we're here. And so Solomon wants us to know the best way to live.
Mm-hmm. And I think I may be back. Sorry, I had my microphone was connected to my phone instead of my computer mic. Go ahead. Sorry.
So you sound clear as a bell now. So
okay.
So in chapter 9, I think what Solomon wants us to understand is really this. Okay, so he's given all this advice about living life under the sun. And he started that, in the beginning, he made sure that we understood that life is vain, that life under the sun is futile. And even with all of the good advice that Solomon gave us in chapter 7 and 8, in chapter 9, he wants us to understand that life is still going to be vain. It's going to be better because of the things that he's given us, but we shouldn't expect that to mean that life is always going to be great, wonderful, and awesome with the advice that he's given us, that there are some things in this life that don't change. And ultimately, the big thing about life is it's short and we all die. But even before that, there are things that happen to us that happens to the good, the just, the clean, and the wicked and the evil. And we just have to deal with that. But that doesn't change the fact that it's better to live the way that he's told us to live. So that's kind of the introduction to chapter 9. In 1 to 6 is where he's really going to make this clear to us. And then in 7 to the end, he's going to give us the same advice that he's been given, except this time it's not advice. It sounds like a command. So, CJ, why don't you read 1 to 6 and we'll talk about those.
But all this I laid to heart, examining it all, how the righteous and the wise and their deeds are in the hands of God. Whether it is love or hate, man does not know. Both are before him. It is the same for all, since the same event happens to the righteous and the wicked, to the good and the evil, to the clean and the unclean, to him who sacrifices and him who does not sacrifice. As the good one is, so is the sinner. And he who swears is as he who shuns an oath. This is an evil in all that is done under the sun, that the same event happens to all. Also the hearts of the children of men are full of evil, and madness is in their hearts while they live, and after they go to the dead. But he who is joined with all the living has hope, for a living dog is better than a dead lion. For the living know that they will die, for the dead know nothing, and they have no reward for them, for the memory of them is forgotten. Their love and their hate and their envy have already perished, and forever they are no more. They have no more share in all that is done under the sun.
Okay. So, you recognize in verse 1 when your translation, the English Standard Version says, but all this I laid to my heart, and the New King James says, for I considered all of this in my heart. That phrase kind of takes us back to chapter 1 and verse 16. He says, I communed with my heart, saying, look, I have attained greatness, and I have gained more wisdom than all who were before me in Jerusalem. My heart has understanding, great wisdom and knowledge, and I set my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly, to perceive. And I perceive that this also is grasping for the wind. So in the beginning, he says, look, I'm going to use my mind. I'm going to use the wisdom that God gave me to answer this question about life. And so now he reminds us. And so that's a way for him to let us know that he's kind of summoned things up. And so, I considered all of this so that I could declare it. And that's an important part of this as well. He's gone on this journey so that we can know what's best. And here's the big thing that he wants us to remember. We cannot forget that whether you are righteous, whether you are wise or not, your works are in God's hand. He is the sovereign. He is the one in control. Remember chapter 3, there's a time for everything, and he's the one that's made it. And so we have to realize that God is the one in control, not us. Now, God is in control, and God knows everything, and God has a plan, and God's working his plan. But does that mean we always know what his plan is in every situation?
No.
No. There are secret things that belong to him. Now, he has revealed much of his plan, but there's a lot about his plan that we know nothing about, but God does. And so we just got to live, right? We just have to live our life.
Hey, and there are things that's part of living by faith, right? Part of living by faith is just doing what we're told and not having to know anything.
Yeah, just trust in him. That's
Mm-hmm.
exactly right. And so then he says, people know neither love nor hatred by anything they see before them. Now, this is kind of a weird statement, and it doesn't mean I can't know what love looks like, or I can't know what hatred looks like. The idea really is, what it really means is, I can't tell, excuse me, if God loves somebody based on their external circumstances. I can't tell if God loves me based on external circumstances.
Right.
And again, to make that even more plain, I don't know who the richest man in the world is right now, if it's Elon Musk or if it's back to Jeff Bezos, but both of those guys are 100 billionaires. Some of the richest men on the planet. That doesn't mean that God loves them more than he loves me, who's not even close to, 100,000-aire.
Right, right,
That's not how you judge. And that's what people tend to think. You remember the story of Job? And why did
right.
his friends tell him he was suffering?
Because he must have done something wrong.
Yeah, and was that right?
No.
Not at all. It wasn't right at all. The reason he was suffering is because God told Satan he was a just man, right? So external circumstances don't tell us anything about our inward dispensation. That's not the word I'm looking for. The word I'm looking for is disposition.
Disposition. Right.
Um, and it doesn't tell us anything about what our standing before God is. And the idea is practically anything can happen to a person, whether they're righteous or not. And so that gets us into verse 2. Um, and, I think when he talks about the same thing happening, I think he is kind of leaning us, getting us to understand that everybody dies. But I think there's more to that here. I think in the process, really, and I like the way yours said it. Um, yours says it is the same for all, since the same event happens to the righteous and the wicked. Um, you know, Wicked people get cancer and die. Righteous people get cancer and die. When a tornado comes through a neighborhood, it messes up all the houses, not just the houses of the wicked people. And that's just the way the world works. And we have to understand that. And it happens to the good, it happens to the sinner, is what he says in that. Now, again, we just have to accept that. We just have to understand that that's true. Um,
No,
Go ahead.
no, no. Does that seem fair though? If I'm doing my best to serve God, why should I have the same fate as a wicked person? That doesn't seem just of God. But Solomon says early in the book, no, it's later in this chapter, that time and chance happen to us all. And so it's not fair law. God hasn't God hasn't called us to be happy in this world. Everything's gonna work out. God never promised life's gonna be fair. Sometimes the wicked prosper. That's Solomon's point. Sometimes the righteous, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, get thrown to a furnace. Granted, they didn't burn, but still, sometimes doing the right thing doesn't mean you're gonna have a good life.
Because again, remember, we're talking about life under the sun. And what Solomon ultimately wants us to get and appreciate is that life under the sun is really about preparing for life in heaven. And that's where everything is made right. life in heaven is where the fairness comes out. And so I think, and this is an I think, but I think that life under the sun is difficult like this for the righteous and for the unrighteous, so that even the righteous will want eternal life and not
Right.
just life under the sun.
And we talked about this before. What is the purpose of longing for heaven if my life is great right now? I mean, I wouldn't need heaven. I've got it made.
That's right.
And so James even says in James 1, count it all joy, my brothers, when you fall into various trials. For what? Just be happy, no reason. He says, verse 3, for the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. These trials that we may not understand now, they make us better.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. In verse 3, Solomon even recognizes that it's an evil thing, that one event happens to the just and the unjust. But, recognizing that helps us deal with it, but it doesn't change it. So there's really no changing the idea that life under the sun is hard, futile, and in some cases evil. Um, and then he says, there are some men who are full of evil, and madness is in their heart while they live. And I think the idea there is that some people, because they recognize that life is short, then they sin exceedingly, um, to try to make that better somehow. The whole you only live once kind of a mentality. So let's go for the gusto. And their madness is that they are just bent on evil. They're spiritually deluded, they're wild, they're unprincipled, and it's amazing to think about. We always talk about that being young men, young people, but it's just amazing to think about how many people as old as me still live in that way, as if life under the sun can somehow fill us up, and it
Right.
can't. And so that's what he's talking about in that verse.
Isn't that the big yellow movement? Have you ever heard that
Oh, sure,
acronym?
absolutely.
Yellow, right?
Yeah, yeah, and it's kind of funny, because it was a catchphrase, but it's kind of gone out of favor among a lot of young people now. But that concept is ancient, of you only
Mm-hmm.
live once.
Right.
I love verse 4, when he says, there is better to be a living dog than a dead lion. The lion is the king of beasts. And so, he sits at the top of the food chain, as Timon said, in The Lion King. And but the living dog, and this isn't your pet dog that gets pampered. This is like the street dog. And so, what would you rather be, a dog or a lion? Well, if my choice is between being a living dog and a dead lion, I'll be the living dog, because
Yeah, right.
with the living dog, there's hope that his circumstances will change. Maybe somebody will adopt him, and he'll get to live the good life. And so that's what he goes into saying in verse 5. When you're alive, there's hope. Because one of the things that is that you're going to die. And so Solomon has already told us that the house of mourning is better than the house of feasting, because you can think about that you're going to live there. You're going to be there. You're not going to live there. You're going to be there someday. So we can consider our death, and so we can prepare for death.
Right.
And what we really should be preparing for is life after death. But once you're dead, your fate is sealed. You can't change anything. You remember the rich man and Lazarus. The rich man, he wanted to change, but go back and tell my brothers. You get them to change. And Abraham tells him, he says, hey, look, if they won't believe Moses, why would they believe somebody comes back from the dead? So nothing could be changed for the rich man. But when you're alive, there's an opportunity to change. And so that's the big idea in those verses. So life happens to everybody. And then death comes to everybody. There's no changing that. Questions or comments about any of that in there through verse 6?
Well, I was gonna ask a question, but Ecclesiastes 9:5 has been used to support the idea that we lose consciousness after we die. When he says, "For the living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing." And well, I just want to think, well, want to know your thoughts about that. I have a few, but what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've also heard it be this verse pointed to say that the people who lived in Old Testament times did not know about the afterlife. But even here in Ecclesiastes 3, Solomon says that God has put eternity on our hearts. In Ecclesiastes 12:7, he talks about the spirit returning to God. And for me, I'm going to look this verse up real quick so that I can give the passage about, let me see this real quick.
I mean, Luke
Here, I got it. Go ahead.
Luke chapter 16 seems to suggest that there's consciousness after death. So the question becomes, which one's right? Do the dead know nothing, or do the dead know something? Is this a contradiction? Well, it can't be that.
Right. So here's the passage I was looking for in John 8:56. Jesus says, "Your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day. He saw it and was glad." Abraham had been dead for over 1,000 years when Jesus came into the world, but Abraham rejoiced when Jesus came into the world. So clearly that passage sounds like Abraham had consciousness beyond the grave. And so I think your question is a good one. And I think what Solomon means in Ecclesiastes 9:5, again, remember, he's making this comparison between life under the sun and, this one thing happening to all people. The dead know nothing really is related to the idea of life under the sun.
Right.
So it's like they're not part of life under the sun anymore. So there's no learning for them. There's no changing their fate. I really think that's more the idea than they just cease to have any consciousness.
Right. That's what I thought too. My take on it was always the dead know nothing that's going on under the sun. But which is interesting, and this could be a whole rabbit. That passage you just brought up seems to suggest they do know what's going on under the earth, on the earth, because Jesus just said Abraham was glad to see my day. So it's not a wrong understanding of this passage.
I think what we're doing is we're probably pushing this passage beyond what its intended purpose is in Ecclesiastes 9. When he says he's making a contrast, for the living know they will die, but the dead know nothing, and they have no more reward, for the memory of them is forgotten. And so the contrast, I really think the contrast isn't about what the dead know when they're dead. I don't think this is a passage trying to teach us anything about what the dead knows when they're dead. I think the idea, again, is the dead know that they're going to die. I'm sorry, the living know that they're going to die. The dead are already dead. And so
Right.
there's no changing that. So
Interesting.
um, and again, I don't know what the dead knows about life under the sun when they're dead. When I look at that passage in John 8, clearly Abraham knew that Jesus came into the world. But did he know that Jesus came into the world because Jesus left heaven? He left the dwelling place. He left that place where Abraham was. Moses and Elijah came to Jesus and talked to him about his decrease and the transfiguration. And so maybe it's kind of related to that.
Interesting.
But again, I think what do we gain by trying to understand what dead people know?
Really nothing, because we're not dead yet.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
uh,
yeah. So I really think the contrast is supposed to be between the dead. The living have an opportunity that the dead don't have. The living have an opportunity to learn and to change, and the dead, their fate is sealed.
Time of the Bible, Curtis says that's his channel. The rich man couldn't send Lazarus or anyone else to change his fate of his brothers. Right?
Right. That's right. Yeah. Which kind of goes to that idea that they are completely separated from life under the sun.
Right.
So
So, do you want me to go ahead and read 4:7 through 10, or do you got some more on that?
no, that's all I got.
Go eat your bread with joy and drink your wine with a merry heart, for God has already approved what you do. Let your garments be always white, let not oil be lacking on your head. Enjoy life with the wife whom you love all the days of your vain life that he has given you under the sun, because that is your portion in life, and in your toil at which you toil under the sun. Whatever your hands find to do, do it with your might. And there is no work or thought or knowledge or wisdom in Sheol to which you are going.
Okay. Um, so again, at the end there in verse 10, I think he's kind of saying the same thing. Your fate is sealed once you get in the grave. In verse 7, there's a command: go, eat your bread with joy. It's kind of interesting because the idea in 7, 8, and 9 is really the idea of contentment once again. This has been an ongoing uh, idea that Solomon has been giving us, is to be content in this life. But like if you look back even at chapter 8 and verse 15, he says, so I commend enjoyment. So this is just something that he's recommending beforehand, but now he's making a command. He is a king, and he is an inspired man. And so he's like, here's a command: go, eat your bread with joy, drink your wine with a merry heart, knowing that God has already accepted your works. So, you know, God approves of us eating and drinking if we eat with gladness and thanksgiving. And, it should go without saying that when Solomon wrote this, the Levitical food laws were in place. So they couldn't just eat anything. He's not saying you can eat and drink whatever you want. He's saying, but what you do eat and drink, do it with joy in your heart, knowing that you are living in a way to be pleasing to God. That again, that's understood here. And then the idea of let your garments be white. These are like what they call festive robes, uh, what we might call our Sunday clothes. They would wear special clothes to go to these feast days. And he says, so dress like you're going to a feast. And when he says, let your head lack no oil, the ancient Jews and people living around them, they would anoint their head every day. They didn't wash their hair every day. And so to bring comfort to their head, they put oil on it. And so it was a comforting thing. And they did it every day, unless they were sick, unless they were mourning. So when he says, let your head lack no oil, he's saying treat every day as if it's a good day.
Yeah.
So like in my notes, I just have the idea, be festive, enjoy life, be upbeat, be positive is what 7 and 8 are saying. And then in 9, enjoy the married life. When God created the world and everything in it, there was one thing in the beginning that he said wasn't good. What was it?
The fruit of the knowledge of good and evil.
No, even before that. I mean, he gave that to man, but he kept saying
sorry.
it's good, but
But it's not good for me to be alone.
that's it. That's exactly it. And so he made a helper suitable to him. And so God intends for man to go through this life married and to be blessed. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be married. We know that. But this is Solomon's recommendation. Live joyfully with the wife you love all the days of your life.
Right.
So I think he is encouraging the male student that he's addressing this to find a good woman and to enjoy life. And I'll tell you right now that I would offer that same advice. That this is one of the great blessings God has given us. You want to know how to make life under the sun more bearable? Find you a good, godly woman, marry her, love her, go through this life with her. It is such a great blessing. It's crazy to me that there are people in this world who think that the good life is to have multiple lovers in their life. And that's just totally wrong. That is just so wrong. The good life is finding one woman to love and to love her all the days of your life. And so that's what Solomon is saying.
And this is really special coming from Solomon, because how many wives did he have? Like 700
Yeah, like
wives.
300 wives and 700 concubines.
Right. But maybe he's saying this is what I've learned.
Yeah,
It's better to have one wife a few years.
absolutely.
And
That's one of
so,
the things that I have talked about before. People talk about how God, there's a lot of people in the Old Testament who had multiple wives. I mean, even Abraham, and David, but it was never a blessing. Think about Jacob and his wives and the trouble they caused him. Think about the trouble. I mean, the Bible clearly says that it was all those wives that led Solomon astray. And so here's Solomon saying, look, what I did was dumb. What you should do is find one woman, love her forever. So I think you're right.
So I got a question here. Why does he say? Because I get the impression from 7 and 8 he's speaking above the sun, but then he says all the days of your vain life. So do you think he switched back to uh, a view of life without God type of idea?
I don't think he means in life under the sun is life in the world. And so here I don't think he's taken God out of the equation, but he's talking about the time that even with God in our life, we got to live in a world full of sin. And so I think that's kind of the idea that he's talking about there. Because he says that God has given you under the sun. So there is a time where we're going to have to live in this vain world. Even if God is with us, we still have to deal with the vanity, the futility of living life under the sun. But here's a blessing that God has given us to help us get through the vanity of life with a little bit more joy. So then in verse 10, he says, he adds to, be festive, enjoy the married life. And I think verse 10 is the idea of working hard. That's one of the ways that we can find joy in life, that we can make this life better is by working hard. God always intended man to work. I mean, even before the fall in Genesis 3, God told Adam to keep and tend the garden. So there was work for him in the garden, even there. And, work is good for man. It's good for our self-esteem. It's good for us in so many ways. Let's, again, be honest. It makes the day go by faster when we have work to do. It makes us feel better about ourselves. It helps other people. It's just good all the way around. And even Jesus encourages us to work. In John 9 and verse 4, he says, work because the night is coming. And I think they think it's the same idea. Colossians 3:23, Paul says, whatever your hand finds to do, do it mightily as unto the Lord. And so again, it's just good for us to understand that life is going to be hard, but the best thing for us to do is be happy, enjoy the relationships of life, and work hard. That's really what he's getting us to understand in these passages. Do you have anything else through 10?
No, you've covered it pretty well.
All right. Let's at least try to do. Let's read 11 and 12.
Again, I saw that under the sun, the race is not to the swift, or battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to the intelligent, nor favor to those with knowledge, but time and chance happen to them all. For man does not know his time, like a fish they are taken in an evil net, and like birds that are caught in a snare. So the children of men are snared at an evil time when suddenly it falls upon them.
Okay. You talked about fairness. And so Solomon comes back here and he says, look, I want you to get this point. Even taking all of the advice that I have just given you, you need to understand something. Life is still vain. Life is still evil. Life still isn't always fair. If you and I are in a foot race and I'm faster than you, I should win. I should win every time. But there are
And
circumstances.
you would win.
There are circumstances where I might not win. What if on my second step in the race, I pull my hamstring and I can't run anymore?
Well, then I would happily run ahead of you.
Yeah.
Uh,
There have been times like in the Olympics where the fastest runner got tripped by one of the other runners and they didn't win. Those things just happen. Sometimes the strongest guy in the fight doesn't always win. And that's just the way it works. And there are some unforeseen things that we can't always prepare for. And that's where he comes back to this idea, but time and chance happen to them all. Sometimes the underdog wins. There are teams who won national championships, like North Carolina State won a national championship back in the 80s. And I don't want to take anything away from them, but the team that they beat, if they played that same game again, if they had to win the best 2 out of 3, there's no way that team is going to win 2 out of 3. But they won that night, and that's just how it goes. Time and chance happen to them all. And I think that means there are just some things that they just happen. Um, Keeping with the basketball thing, sometimes a guy shoots a basketball and it goes in, sometimes it doesn't. I don't know that God controls every time the ball goes in the basket or not. It's just time and chance happen to all. There are accidents. People are in automobile accidents. I don't know that God causes every accident that ever happens to happen. I think time and chance just happen. There are some things in this life that just happen. And so that's what we have to understand. And man doesn't know. How old are you, CJ?
18.
You're 18. I'm 54. By chance, or by averages, I might have another 35, maybe 40 years tops, and you may have 70 years tops. But that's time and chance. You might live 70 more years. I might die today, and I don't have a clue when I'm going to die. And that's the idea. A man does not know his time. He's like a fish taken in a net, like a bird caught in a snare. You just don't know. So I think what he's getting at is this: quit worrying about the fact that life isn't fair. Quit worrying about the fact that bad things happen to good people and good things happen to bad people. Instead, go back to what he said. Live your life, enjoy your life, work hard, prepare for death, lay up treasure in heaven, because who knows when the Lord is going to return.
Amen. James chapter 3 says your life is but a vapor. It's here for a while, and then it vanishes. It's gone.
That's it.
I could walk outside right now, going to church, and bam, a car hits me, and I'm in eternity.
That's right.
Unexpected. Time and chance happen to us all.
Yeah. People who are 18 years old die every day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's probably a good place for us to stop. I was hoping to get a little further, but hey, we covered a good chunk.
Yeah. So, alright, thank you, Simon, for taking us through that. If you have any other comments, or questions, you can reach us at Facebook and our YouTube channel under my name, CJ Marshall. Until next week, let your light shine, and God bless.
God bless you.